Joining us this week for the Wednesday Bookmark is Andrea Mrozek. Andrea has worked in journalism and think tanks in Europe and Canada. She writes and speaks about marriage, childcare, and women's issues. Prior to joining think tank Cardis, she was executive director of the Institute of Marriage and Family Canada. We're going to talk this morning about her book, co-authored with Peter John Mitchell. It's called I Do, Why Marriage Still Matters. Andrea, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thanks for having me on.
So early in the book, you differentiate between two broad models of marriage, namely the soulmate model and the institutional model. Discuss the differences between those two ways of thinking about and approaching marriage.
Right. So in my lifetime, we have never known an institutional model, which is part of the book's effort, is to ask people to imagine what marriage could be like in our lives. The soulmate model is where we very firmly live. This is a version of marriage that rests almost exclusively on love and ideas of love, romantic attachment, authenticity, connection. The result of this is that it actually puts a lot of pressure on the people that we marry. And another result, I'd say, would be it can lead to getting out of marriage when those feelings are gone. So a soulmate model is very firmly where we live. Most people would say they view marriage as a sign of love, and nowhere are we arguing that the institutional model of marriage should be loveless, but that love is a part of marriage and not the, there's a popular book called Love Conquered Marriage. Not that love has conquered marriage, but rather that love is part of the institutional model of marriage. So we want to ask people to think about that bigger vision for marriage and what marriage could be outside of the soulmate model.
Yeah, that's well put. The weight of existing research points to what the social sciences have come to term the marriage advantage. How does marriage, in fact, specifically benefit men, women, and children?
Yeah, so that's a big part of the book because you need to have a why behind. If you want to care about marriage in any form, then you need to know why. And I think that we've lost a little bit of that vocabulary. So we tuck all that research into a chapter in the book and itemize the benefits for men, women, and children, some of which include financial benefits. So being wealthier in a marriage. Another one that is a bit surprising to some is there's a health advantage. So you can come out better out of cancer treatments, for example, or withstand a heart event better. Sue Johnson is the famous author, British Canadian, who wrote about attachment in marriage, and she was actually involved with the Ottawa Heart Institute. Sadly, she's passed away, but part of that was to identify the ways in which marriage actually helps people come out of heart events better and stronger. And so that's a health advantage. And for children, I think the marriage is fairly unequivocal about the nature of the importance of marriage. It's a stabilizing force. Children are more likely to graduate from high school, go on to higher education, less likely to engage in antisocial behaviors, less likely to get pregnant out of wedlock or as a teenager. These sorts of outcomes are the types of things that that's how we come to arrive at the term, the marriage advantage.
And you make the point in the book, and I think it's a very worthy point, that the health advantages, perhaps specifically, you're talking about healthy marriages there.
Yeah.
Those only apply in a healthy marriage.
Only apply in a healthy marriage. A good marriage can be your making, and a bad marriage can be the breaking of your life. It can be very, very difficult. But what we don't want is for people to throw the baby out with the bathwater and say that because oftentimes we have such pain associated with our marriages. Divorce is common and a lot of anguish associated with marriage. We don't want people to throw out the baby with the bathwater and say that because these outcomes are associated with healthy marriages and not every marriage is healthy, therefore we don't value marriage. That would be the wrong conclusion. We would want to be identifying ways in which to strengthen marriage for everybody, not trap people in bad marriages, but have an environment in which marriage is healthy and healthier for more people.
Marriage is often referred to as an institution, which implies a certain permanence, obviously, but all institutions shift over the course of time. So, how has marriage changed, both for the good and for the bad, over the
Mhm.
years?
Yeah, so I wouldn't want to be the person saying that everything was good in the past and now everything has gotten worse. It's true that marriage rates are declining, and so that sort of shows that we value the institution less. But I'd say that one of the ways in which I would view this as a favorable change from a previous climate, or at least it explains the advent of no fault divorce. When that was introduced, before no fault divorce was introduced, you had to prove wrongdoing on the part of your spouse in order to get out of a marriage, and so that was a very inflexible time. Now, how no fault divorce is used today is a different story, but today we inhabit a culture that is really freedom oriented, so much as to be overwhelming for people. Sometimes there's just too many choices, and you can often feel like you don't have community, you don't have support, you can't
Mm.
rely on your marriage. But that's kind of one positive thing. You can at least understand how no fault divorce came about, um, and that would be one positive in the changing of the institution. That's what makes conversations about marriage tricky and interesting, is because there's no simple answers. We are advocating for this institutional view of marriage while simultaneously recognizing that institutions do shift and change over time, and they should, to meet the needs that they're meant to address. But where is the perfect line? And so that's the question that, we're asking people to think about as well.
Hmm. Marriage is a human universal, present throughout recorded history, but that deep history itself may be part of the conundrum for marriage today, and you point that out. So, how do we go about baking the ongoing relevance of marriage back into a very modern culture, especially for those who might be skeptical about it?
Yeah, I think that it's going to happen organically in some ways. We are hitting a point. Again, the culture has shifted so much from even the 60s before no fault divorce was introduced. I think we today are seeking more stability, and many people are desiring to be able to be in long term relationship and finding that impossible to achieve. Dating culture, if you can even use the word, is in shambles. Sexual ethics are so free, and then the end result is a lot of less people are having sex these days. There's a lot of things that the sexual revolution was supposed to bring and it didn't deliver. So I just think that we are on the cusp of some kind of cultural change
Hmm.
that is happening. This book is part of that, but there are many other books that are indicating that change is happening. Louise Perry, The Case Against the Sexual Revolution, is one book I highly recommend for people who are skeptical of the role of marriage or the importance of marriage. She talks about marriage in her book, and at the same time as identifying the problematic aspects of how we do relationships and life with other people.
Last question, Andrea. What should we be teaching our kids about marriage so that the generations coming up behind us understand, as you say, that marriage still matters?
Yeah, not everybody has to get married. We're not into, insisting on this for everybody, obviously. No forced marriage. But I think kids today really view marriage as a nice thing, but totally unnecessary.
Hmm.
So, what I think parents want to be driving home is that this is actually um, universal in human history. It is important if you wish to have children, and many of us do. This marriage arrangement is the best way to go. And it's not a nice thing to have. It's not the icing on the cake. It's a necessary thing to have and a foundational part of life. So if we could be teaching our kids that, we might find we return to placing a greater value on marriage, which might result in us doing our relationships in a different way and thinking about them differently and taking them more seriously across the board.
Hmm. I do. Why marriage still matters. Andrea Mrozek, our guest this week for the Wednesday Bookmark. Really interesting stuff. Thanks so much, Andrea, for your time this morning.
Thanks for having me.